My name is Max Bamfield. Welcome to my talk. Today I will be discussing creativity. What is it? When I try to determine the nature of something, I like to get information from the best sources available, and then I elaborate my studies outwards. So why would you listen to me talking about creativity? Well, I'm the inventor of numerous things which are now world famous. You may not know me, but you know what I've invented. For example, I developed a method of treating chronic fatigue syndrome, which is now known as pacing. I also invented the world's first standing computer desk, and it's now used by prime ministers, presidents, Apple, Google, Facebook, and the people who refer to themselves in relation to that call themselves panel of international experts or the world leading authority, etc. I'm the actual inventor. And I also determined the cause of the most common form of non-cardiac chest pain, which has been a mystery for 2,000 years. That's just a few of my inventions. And I have, over time, been told that I'm a creative person. So today, to discuss these things, I will mention three things, and within the end of that time, which possibly be 5 to 10 minutes, you will know what creativity is. So the first thing I want to talk about is when I was a teenager, people would occasionally say that I was creative or very creative. And at that age, the only thing I know is that it was a compliment because of the nature of the word. For example, somebody said, there's a cat, I know what a cat was. If there's a car, I know what a car was. Or there's a house, you know what a house is. The word creative is not so clearly definable. I was young. My vague understanding the word creative was that a conservative person would, for example, wear a black suit, black trousers with a crease, black tie, white shirt and leather shoes and short back size hair. They'd be called conservative, or they'd be referred to in such terms. Whereas somebody who wore a green shirt, red trousers, a black and white hat with a propeller on top would be called creative. A little bit different, even weird. Well, creativity doesn't mean weird. In some ways, it doesn't even mean difference. So let me explain. I didn't know why people were calling me creative. So why did I remember it? Well, because it stood out. I wasn't the type of person to attract compliments. So when someone said I was creative, it didn't mean anything, but I remembered it. Now, I'd like to go through to the age of about 19. I was involved in gymnastics. I was an instructor. And I went on to a leadership training camp for about 3 days and found out about a course at the Institute of Technology where leadership was taught. And it was a course called group work. And I applied for 3 scholarships because I didn't think I'd get any, and I actually got all 3. One, for example, was from the National Fitness Council of Australia. And I actually did the course. And while I was there, there's one incident I'd like to mention to you. Probably the second year, the head lecturer set an assignment. And it was to go out into the community and study a few groups and write a report. So I did. And I handed in the assignment, and about a week later, the head lecturer is walking down the corridor and she said, "Max, come into my office." And I thought, I'm in trouble here. But I didn't know why. And I was doing this course because I wanted to. I wasn't some school kid trying to get a job. It didn't matter whether I passed or not. I was there to learn what I wanted to learn. So I wasn't worried. It just struck me. So I went there and walked into the head lecturer's office, and she's sitting next to the assistant head lecturer. And I should be, fair to the head lecturer. She was a woman in her 50s, and she was the type of person who wanted all of her students to succeed in her course and go on and prosper as when they left the course. And she said to me, so there's nothing, I could not ever say anything bad about it. So she said to me, Max, what book did you get these ideas from? She's looking at my assignment, and I thought, you need to look at this from my point of view if you're watching now. I'm confused here. The head lecturer had actually asked me and others to go out into the community and study groups and report on them. She hadn't asked me to read a book. I never read one. And I didn't really know how to answer the question. But after a bit of thought, I said, I'm going to get into trouble here. I said, you didn't ask me to read a book. You asked me to go out in the community and write a report. And then her facial expression changed from being somewhat angry to shocked. He said, you didn't get these ideas from a book? And I thought, no. And she said, you're the most creative person I ever met in my life. One day you're going to change the way the world thinks about humanity. Now I'd like you to think about this. I went there to study leadership in gymnastics. The course involved psychology, group psychology, and she's telling me I'm going to have an influence on humanity. And I had no interest in that whatsoever. So I left her office, and basically she implied certain things which I can't really remember in precise terms, but something like this. Max, next time, I want you to read the book, not write the book. And then another thing she said was, I'd like you to read what the top students are doing and how they do it, and do it that way next time. Now, like you watching now, to put yourself in my position, I went there not because I was a school kid passing an exam. I went there to learn what I wanted to learn, not to learn what other people wanted to learn, unless it was of interest to me. And I thought, if I do things the way other people do them, I'm not creative. So her comments were somewhat contradictory. And I didn't think any more of it, but I wasn't going to do what the other students did for various reasons. So I didn't change much. Now, a few years later, I became gradually ill, very severely ill, and I thought the medications I'm getting aren't helping, the doctors don't understand the problem, I'll do the research myself. And I thought, isn't that what any intelligent person would do? So I began doing research, and within a few years I was writing essays that people were criticising or complimenting me on, and solving a lot of problems. And I became involved and was put in charge of a research team, for example, involving up to 60 or more people, including 2 research cardiologists. And I was the guy who was organising it and getting the results. And in that general period, which was around about somewhere between 1980 and 1983 or 4, I wanted to solve a problem. And the way I solve problems is I identify something. For example, I wouldn't go vaguely stumbling into it. I'd identify one symptom and I'd study it and say, why is that there? Why doesn't it show on x-rays? Where is it hiding? And other people, of course, say, oh, it's not there. You can't see it's not there, therefore it's imaginary, or it's not there, therefore it's caused by worry, fear and stress. And I said, no, it's not. Because my personal experience, it wasn't. So I'd say, why and where is it hiding? And I was finding the answer to many of these questions. And I would then say, I need some more information. So I'd get on the bus, I'd have a look at the literature I had at my own home, and I'd get on the bus, go to town, to the Adelaide University Medical Library, and search through references in books and research papers. Now, I didn't go to town to find the answers because there weren't any. The research papers I was reading say, we don't know the answers. More researchers did. So I wasn't going there to look at the answers. I was going there to find clues that could fill in the gaps that I had in whatever I was studying at the time. Well, one day that happened and I hopped on the bus and there were only about 4 people on the bus. And one was a guy about in his 30s and I sat down next to him. And I said, why are you going to town? To start conversation. And he said he's a university student going to Adelaide University. And I thought, I was a bit sceptical, and I said, you don't look like you're a student age 15. And then he said, well, no, he's not. He's an adult entry student, which made sense. I'd heard about that. And he said he left school when he was 15, got a job, because he didn't like school. He got a job and he didn't like it. So he applied to get university qualifications so he could get another job, a better job, one that he liked. And I thought that's fair enough. So then he said, what are you going to town for? Now, because my illnesses didn't show up on x-rays, they're generally called mental illnesses. There's nothing physically wrong with you, and the cause is psychological. And that attracted a lot of stigma at that time, a considerable amount. But I'd studied at the Institute of Technology and I knew how much harm stigma could do it to a person's personality. So I didn't want to become the victim of stigma, for various reasons, including the fact that I wasn't mentally ill. So whenever anybody asked that question, I'd say, I'll tell you when you're a bit older. It's a joke sort of thing. And it solved that problem. And whenever I was writing or talking about it, my name was Max Banfield. Practically everybody knew me as Max. Practically nobody knew my surname. So when I published anything in publications, I was Max from South Australia. Nobody knew it was me. Or I was M.A. Banfield, and no one knew it was me. My name was on my publications, but no one knew it was me. And I had various ways of disguising my identity so that I didn't become the victim of stigma. And so I said, I couldn't say to this guy, look, I'll tell you when you're a bit older, because it didn't make sense in this context. So he said, what are you going to town for? And I said, well, I'm going to Adelaide University Medical Library myself, as a matter of fact. And then, of course, he said, why? That's why I don't like asking questions and answering questions. One leads to another until they find out what is not necessarily what you want them to know. And I said, well, I'm going there to solve problems, to solve a problem. And now I want you to consider this from my point of view. Now, you're watching this now. Consider this from my point of view. This is a uni student, age 30, saying to me, how do you solve problems? I thought, if a child asked me how to solve problems, I could understand. Even a school kid, even a teenager. There's a 30-year-old guy going to you and he says, how do you solve problems? Like, doesn't he know how? Or does he know how and he wants to know how I do it? So I had to think about the answer. And I said much the same as what I've just said to you. I said, I think about a particular problem. I identify a problem very closely, very precisely. I work out an idea of what might be the cause and I find it, or particularly I will come up with a way of solving that problem. Say how to get rid of a particular pain. And then I would see if my application of that method works. And he said, oh. And then he said, now, I want you watching this now to think of this from my point of view. He said, what if that doesn't solve the problem? And I'm thinking, what is the obvious thing to do? Why is he asking? And I said, well, I come up with another idea and I experiment with that. Which is what I do. Doesn't everybody? I'm thinking to myself. And then he said, what if that doesn't solve the problem? And I'm starting to think, what is it? I better be polite. And I said, well, I come up with another idea. And I do another experiment. And then he said he couldn't come up with even one idea in a year. And he said, in fact, if he didn't have to come up with an idea for his assignment at the end of the year, he wouldn't even come up with one. He has to come up with an idea. That's the only reason he does it, because otherwise he won't pass his exam and he won't get a job. And that's the first time in my life I knew what creativity was. Because I can tell you that morning I would have come up with 20 ideas before breakfast. If I wasn't talking to him on the bus, I'd come up with another 10 ideas on the way to town, another 20 at the medical library in Adelaide University, another 10 on the way home, another 20 in the afternoon, then I'd have tea and another 20 after that. The number of ideas I produce is just astonishing. And that's how I solve problems. Now, I could say a lot more to you here today about what creativity is. But it's the production of ideas aimed at solving problems. And what is the value of creativity? Supposing the chances of solving a problem are 1,000,000 to 1, you're not going to solve it unless you come up with an idea. You're not going to solve it if you give up after the first experiment. You're not going to solve it if you give up after the first 1,000. You do 1,000,000 experiments, sooner or later you're going to come up with the answer. And that's the creativity doesn't become recognised for what it is because of the failures. It becomes recognised for what it is when you succeed. And I've succeeded many times, and that's why people who use my ideas are generally presented to the public as amazing people. And they say they got the idea from a sudden epiphany last month, or they got the idea from a chat with a friend 3 years ago, or they did a clever survey. Well, I'm here to tell you, I produce those ideas, and now you know how I do it, and now you know why people say I'm creative. I could say a lot more, but I don't want to wax lyrical or confuse the issue. So I hope you understand the 3 things that I've said today. When I was a teenager, people said I was creative, occasionally. I didn't know why. When I was at the Institute of Technology, the head lecturer said I was the most creative person she'd ever met, and I didn't know why. When I was 30 and I was talking to someone who comes up with one idea a year, I know why. I come up with thousands, and I'm still doing it. And that now, 40 years have gone by, still do that. Anyway, that's what creativity is. There are other types of creativity, of course, but that's another issue, and I may talk more on this later. Thank you for listening.